Our album, American Disillusionment, is a compilation of 2 Cold War-era songs and 1 from post-Cold War, all of which are anti-war themed. The cover of our album displays Vietnam soldiers fighting near a nuclear explosion. The cover is representative of the horror of war, and so gives the anti-war feeling of the songs in it. My chosen decade, the 1980s, has a song from the Cold War called Russians. From the first interpretation of the title, one would most likely think it's about the Soviets and the Cold War. The title is pretty self-explanatory in that way. Most likely also has the United States involved as well. As a summary of the events in the song, at the beginning, the paranoia of Americans and Europeans is described, how they are primed for any strike on them from the Russians. Then, nuclear weapons are discussed and the repercussions of them, Sting saying that both Russians and Americans are human and deserve to live. In the middle of the song, he says that he does not believe in the concept of a winnable war any longer. And the end of the song is a repetition of the beginning, with him saying that he hopes that the Russians love their children as well as the Americans do. In the first line of the song, a growing feeling of hysteria, is referring to the feeling of paranoia that both Europe and the United States had during the Cold War. The line, "conditioned to respond to all the threats," is referring to the preparations that both Europe and the United States were making to prepare for any strike by the Soviets. The rhetorical speeches of the Soviets refers to the speeches that said that Europe and America would be destroyed, which is also referred to in the next line. Mr. Khrushchev said, "We will bury you," which was more figurative than literal. I don't subscribe to this point of view. It would be such an ignorant thing to do if the Russians love their children too. Sting disagrees with this point of view, as he says, in that he does not agree that the Soviets should destroy Europe or the United States. As later he says, it'd be such an ignorant thing to do if the Russians love their children too, which refers to the concept of mutually assured destruction. How can I save my little boy from Oppenheimer's deadly toy? Oppenheimer's deadly toy refers to nuclear weapons, as Oppenheimer was one of the designers of nuclear weapons. There is no monopoly of common sense on either side of the political fence. No monopoly on common sense refers to the fact that both sides should have common sense and not detonate weapons. We share the same biology, regardless of ideology. Believe me when I say to you, I hope the Russians love their children too. We share the same biology, regardless of ideology, indicates that both Russians and Americans and Europeans are all human, and none of them deserve to die. There's no historical precedent to put the words in the mouth of the president. There's no such thing as a winnable war. It's a lie we don't believe anymore. No such thing as a winnable war is referring to the fact that the Cold War was not a war in the normal concept of most wars in the past. in that it was the Cold War, instead of being with many troops on ground, it was a lot of ideological battles as well. Mr. Reagan says, "We will protect you. I don't subscribe to this point of view," refers to he doesn't think that the U.S. should have to protect anyone and that they should get along and not go to war.
Believe me when I say to you, I hope the Russians love their children too.
He again repeats the lyrics referring to both sides being human and that he hopes none of them detonate their nuclear weapons because it would be destruction for both sides. The tone of this song is anti-war and also fairly grim. The way the song is sung, if listened to, is in a sad tone of voice, most likely indicating the feeling that the world is not going the way that Sting wanted it to. The lyrics follow this idea with lines such as, "It'd be such an ignorant thing to do," displaying a sort of contempt. There are no major shifts in attitude or tone during the song. The attitude is fairly constant throughout the lyrics, and while listening, the voice is similar throughout. The title, Russians, after listening to it, is definitely referring to the Soviet Union. The title represents the United States' opposition to it, which is almost ironic, as the song discusses stopping being at war and preventing mutually assured destruction. The overall theme of the song is anti-war, in that America should not attack the Soviet Union with nuclear weapons or vice versa, as both nations would perish as a result.
My song is Rooster by Alice in Chains. It is a song about the author's father serving in the Vietnam War. The title is symbolizing the narrator's father, who during the war was called Rooster because of his hair. The attitude is proud of his father, and the tone shifts from melancholy to vigorous throughout the song. First stanza is slow and sad, the second stanza has more vigor to it, and the final stanza is slow but full of life. The theme for this is war is hell. Paraphrase. The song's focus stays in Vietnam. The beginning of the song talks about the miserable conditions of being in the war in Vietnam, such as high humidity and danger lurking around every corner. The middle of the song talks about his experiences in the Vietnam War and after it, such as getting spit on for serving in Vietnam, watching some of his friends die, and taking pills to prevent malaria. The end of the song is the chorus, which tells us that Jerry does not die in the war. Connotation, in order. Eyes burn with stinging sweat. Heat and humidity made conditions miserable, causing sweating. It seems every path leads me to nowhere. While in combat, it was difficult to find the way around, or know your location. Wife, kids, household pet. The author does not want a mundane family or job. Army Green was no safe bet. The Army seemed like a relatively safe job until war breaks out. The bullets screamed to me from somewhere. In the dense forest, it's hard to see who was firing at you from where. Here they come to snuff the rooster. Rooster was the name of the author's father. Because of his hair, he was often called Rooster. Walking tall machine gun man. When it was clear, soldiers could walk normally, often walking tall with machine guns pointed directly in front of them. They spit on me in my homeland. Anti-war people often treated Vietnam veterans very harshly. Got my pills against mosquito death. Malaria was common. To prevent it, they took pills to kill it. The 90s was known for its rebellious spirit. This song shows rebellious spirit because it is talking about the Vietnam War, a controversial event in U.S. history. This is rebellious because most people wouldn't bring this controversial event back into discussion.
The transition from the 90s to the 2000s saw a difference between the focus on the past that was in the 1990s with a change to the focus on the new series of threats and wars that appeared in America during the 2000s. This change is almost as a backwards movement. As the 80s was focused more on current events, the 90s started to look backwards, and then the 2000s started to look more towards current events again.
The decade I chose for this project was the 2000s, and the song I chose that I believe fits perfectly with the time period known as the 2000s was Psychosocial by Slipknot. Now, I believe this song perfectly represents the time period at hand due to its themes of self-indulgence, consumerism, war, and government corruption. In the beginning of the song, there is a very deep bass riff, setting the tone of hopelessness and sadness. Inside the first line of the song, the lead singer and writer Corey Taylor says, "I've done my time and I went out." This first line helps set a theme in place by stating how Corey is done with society when he says, "I've done my time," and how he wants to not be in society when he says, "and I went out." Inside the second stanza, he states how these problems are nothing new when he says, "This isn't nothing new, but when we killed it all, the hate is all we have." Not only is he stating that the problems are nothing new, but he also states how these problems have been killed and how there is only hate that is left after the problems have been destroyed. But then he states that there have been these problems longer than previously thought when he says, "This is nothing new." Throughout lines like those stated above, Corey is reaching out to society in order to stop a great cultural and societal decadence. Stanza of the song Psychosocial deals with the topics of the lies and destruction of society. He first begins with the trend when he says, this line deals with how insincere modern day human behavior is. The third line states, it doesn't touch, the soul is not so vibrant, the reckoning. Corey used the reckoning in order to see how Judgment Day is coming for humanity due to its actions, and says, the sickening in relation to how these actions will lead to society's oblivion. Talks about the falseness and superficiality of society. Go drill your deserts, go dig your graves. Refers to wars for oil in the Middle East, such as the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, which were both in the 2000s. Fill your mouth with all the money you will save. This refers to the abundance of consumerism and how it's created a cult of self-indulgence. Sinking in, getting smaller again. Refers to previous lines about wars in the Middle East and how we are wasting more resources than we are gaining from these wars. I'm done! It has begun! I'm not the only one! This line states how citizens are finally waking up to the lies and destruction around them. And the rain will kill us all. Throw ourselves against the wall. represents society's inactions and how it will kill them all. And the wall is a cage which they are trapped in.
No one else can see the preservation of the moderate me.
This line describes how nobody else can see the truth of society's destruction and how he will die as a hero or martyr for the truth. The second stanza begins with These three lines refer to how the current social structure and lies that have been propagated are falling in on itself.
This is nothing new, but when we kill it all, the hate was all we had.
This line refers to how the government and media have been lying for much longer than commonly believed, leading to social issues such as increased racism and anti-Semitism.
Who needs another mess? We could start over. Just look me in the eyes and say I'm wrong.
This line refers to how society will create another mess if it continues, and how society refuses to acknowledge this fact.
Now there's only emptiness.
This line states how Corey feels hopeless for the future.
But I'm missing something. I think we're good. I'm not the only one.
Refers to previous lines with how there is no hope for society in reversing the change which has been done. The third stanza starts with
And the rain will kill us all. Throw ourselves against the wall, but no one else can see the preservation of the moderate me.
spreading lies. An example of this would be saying that Saddam Hussein had WMDs, but after the Iraq War, there was no WMDs found.
I'm trying to tell you facts, purple lines are giving out.
Inside this line, Corey Taylor is saying how he has tried warning society, but without success.
Really idea, if it's nothing season, is this what you want? I'm not the only one. And the rain will kill us all. Throw ourselves against the wall, but no one else can see the preservation of the moderate me. And the rain will kill us all. We throw ourselves against the wall, but no one else can see the preservation of the moderate me.
Throughout the song, there is a dark and depressing tone. This begins with a deep bass guitar riff at the beginning of the song, which helps set a tone of hopelessness. After that, the lead singer Corey Taylor shouts the very first line, "I did my time and I went out." This first line helps progress the tone by creating a dark statement that he's done with society and he wants to die. Throughout the song, the tone stays extremely similar and lacks any major changes. While lacking major shifts throughout the song, the attitude remains rather constant and does its job of setting up the theme very decisively and successfully. After many trials and a lot of time allocated in order to create a critical analysis of the title psychosocial has been used in order to refer how society has become crazier and narcissistic through war, consumerism, and individualism. The theme of psychosocial is that war, consumerism, and self-indulgence must be stopped or it will be our doom.